Okay, good morning everyone. I'm assuming you can all hear me okay. So first of all, I'd just like to thank everyone from the Association of Hong Kong Language Centres for making it possible for me to be here. I'd like to thank people individually, but every time I do, I invariably leave out the most important people. So I'll just leave it at the broad to everybody, because there are so many people who've really been very, very helpful, very supportive, and have done so much to make it possible for me to be here. Now, as I was very kindly introduced, I'm talking about exploring the realities of AI in the language classroom. I suppose I probably better position myself a little bit. I've been in the field of technology, language teaching and learning for a long time. I was doing work back in the mid-1990s in the field. I've watched a lot of things happen. I developed my own AI tools back in the early 2000s. Obviously, the things that have happened in the last 10 years or so make much of that seem very obsolete and in some ways, I guess, childish from a programming point of view. But I think there are still lessons that could have been learnt and have been learnt by a lot of the work that was done by pioneers in the field of language teaching and technology and intelligent tools, artificial intelligence, over the last 25 to 30 years. We often talk about AI as if it's something which has just popped up since ChatGPT. It's not. It's been around for an awfully long time. And there has been a lot that we have seen that is kind of coming back again in terms of concepts and in terms of our need to consider the role of the technology and the role of the teacher. Earlier on, we had the question of are teachers going to be replaced by technology? Now, this question has been asked for the last 40 years, and it's continuing to be asked, and it will continue to be asked. I'll give away the punchline straight away. My view on this is no. Teachers will always have a place. Technology will have a place, but the role of teachers and the role of the technologies are going to change. They have to change. So if we are trying to teach with technologies from 2025, using teaching approaches from 1985, then of course we're going to struggle. So it means that there's going to be adjustment. Okay? Now, just the last thing that I'd like to say is that probably many of you know that I'm currently the editor-in-chief of the Computer Assisted Language Learning Journal. This journal, we receive an enormous number of submissions about artificial intelligence. We receive an enormous number of submissions all up. We get about 1,500 submissions per year. Now, of these submissions, at the moment, I'd say around 40% would be looking at generative AI tools in language teaching and learning. There are some really interesting things being said, and there is a lot of wheel reinventing as well. A lot of people are still trying to continue with arguments that we see that artificial intelligence has potential to play a role in language teaching and learning. But the problem is that we're not seeing as much as we should about what the realities actually are. And this is something that I would like to touch upon in my presentation today, bearing in mind, of course, I do have limited time. All right, so I think probably many of you could relate to this situation with generative AI at the moment. We're kind of in this stage in the world where we're seeing people who are both overestimating and underestimating generative AI in language education. And I think probably both of these views are fair enough. Okay, so if we look at these from the point of view, we have from the overestimated point of view, I think a lot of people are carrying very unrealistic expectations about what AI can actually achieve and the way that it can replace humans. Now, I'll point out that AI can take on certain roles that are currently being done by humans, but that doesn't mean that AI will replace humans as teachers across the board. We can see that we need to be careful to make sure we don't throw our complete trust into AI. A healthy sense of doubt, I think, is extremely important. And this healthy sense of doubt is something that we need to also be passing on to our students, and I do frequently. At the same time, we also need to be careful that we don't just simply dismiss AI to say that, well, this is just a passing fad. Okay, it's just a glorified search engine. Okay, it is a function of it, but it's obviously a lot more than that. Okay, it is able to bring together information and present this in a way which is very palatable. But this can be both a blessing and a curse at the same time, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later as we go. So a question, what are we expecting from AI? This is something that I'm not sure we seriously ask ourselves as often as perhaps we could. And I say ourselves because I mean me too. I'm a language teacher. I've been a language teacher for an awfully long time. I've been at Waseda now for around 20 years. My background is actually as a Japanese language teacher. I taught Japanese in Australia for a number of years. So I've been a language teacher for an awfully long time. From this, I've probably made every single possible mistake that you could think of using technology. I've had some successes and some spectacular failures, but this is part of the learning process. And I think that this is where we are at the moment with generative AI as well. So we need to come back to this question one more time. What are we expecting from AI? I think probably many of you might have seen this posted on social media somewhere. And it's nothing to do with language education, but I think you can see the parallels. I won't read it out. I think probably you can read it using your own tone better than I would. Okay, so I think that if we take it from this point of view, sorry, I'll move away from my mic. If we think about this for a moment, the question that we should be asking then is, what do we want AI to do and what do we want to do? This is actually a more complicated question than we might first think. We often think about, well, we want AI to do this, we want AI to do that. But where's we in the middle of this? Okay, so if you think about our expectations for AI, what are we actually considering? What is it that we're actually wanting to do? Now, I'm going to list some things that many of us are probably expecting from AI. Okay, this is not exhaustive, but I think probably you can relate to a number of these. Okay, so search engine, a personalized tutor, a grammar checker, translation tool, a content outline creator, okay, quiz, test generator, automated grading tool, conversation partner, and so on, so on, so on. Now, this list is what I've seen in the research which is being submitted to the Call Journal as well as other places as being published. Okay, so there are more, but I think this probably sums up some of the major roles that we see, the expectations for AI. But this is showing what the role of AI is. But where is the we as teacher in this, which is something I'm going to come back to in a moment. Okay, so at the core of everything is technological capacity does not equate with pedagogical value. Now, I'm sure most of you are very aware of just how complex our most recent models of LLM, the ChatGPT, the GPT models actually are. Okay, the number of parameters is astounding. The processing power is phenomenal. I mean, the fact that the amount of energy being used by OpenAI and just simply running ChatGPT can give you an indication of how much power there is. It is quite phenomenal. But that doesn't mean that it's a perfect teacher. And as a matter of fact, it's far from it. And there's a lot to show that it is limited in many, many ways as a teaching tool, as is. Again, I'll come back to this point later on. I just want you to take a moment to have a look at the two quotes that I put, or at least the two citations that I put there. Godward Jones, as you know, talks about this a lot, 2023. But can you see the other one I put there was 2003? I did that on purpose because we've been saying this again and again and again and again. And I'm sure in 20 years' time it's going to be someone else, 2043, saying technological capacity doesn't mean pedagogical value. We need to get over that. Okay? The technology can do things, but it is not an educator in itself. Now, we talk about generative AI as being a disruption. So what does disruptive technology mean? Okay, it means it changes things. Okay? And it's really changed things. Okay? So changing things, is that necessarily a bad thing? We often talk about the good old days. Okay? Can you think about when we talk about concepts such as good old days, and we think, oh, back in the good old days we had this and we had that and everything was so wonderful. But when you think realistically, do you really want to go back to living 70 years ago? Things have become very convenient. The same can be said for the tools that are available to us. Things have changed. Things have become much easier. Okay? So, technology is going to change things. Generative AI is absolutely changing things. Okay? We need to change with the technology. Okay? We can't sit back and complain about it because unfortunately it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to change. We see probably a lot of people have an over-enthusiasm about the technology, and this has been particularly the case with generative AI. But in many cases, the over-enthusiasm comes from the administrators and not from the teachers. Why? Budget cuts. Okay? This is a sad reality. This has been going on for decades. Okay? If we put a computer in every classroom, we won't need to. We can use Windows XP, okay? Way back in the good old days. Okay? Things have been continuing like this on and on and on. Okay? Administrators are always looking at ways of replacing us. Okay? I will not be replaced, thank you. Okay? But we need to show why we shouldn't be replaced. And this is the point. Okay? We need to be bringing with us a critical scrutiny. Okay? Look at these technologies to see what they can do, but also see what they can't do. But these discussions need to happen at a point where the administrators can also see this in a convincing way. And I'm going to bring up a few probably uncomfortable discussions that we probably need to be having. And one of them is about accountability with technology. Now, we are asking our students to declare their use of generative AI in assessment. But we're also going to see teachers needing to do the same thing. Okay, so do we use generative AI to assist us in creation of materials, even marking? Most likely, because it's quite convenient. Okay? But at the same time, are we doing this in a way that we are trying to have the technology replace us? Are we doing this? And again, I'm going to come back to this. We do definitely have these renewed fears of teachers being replaced by the technology. Okay? It's becoming more of a discussion now than it has in the past because the technology is far more impressive. Okay? If somebody has a short to medium discussion with generative AI, they will find that it really, really takes on human-like qualities. Once you get a little bit deeper, though, you can see that this is not across the board. It has some severe limitations as well. Now, are all of these limitations going to be overcome? Many of them. Does that mean that we will become less and less relevant in today's society? And I argue, no, I don't believe so. Let's look at this one. We have the dilemma of teacher use of AI. Okay. Should we be using AI as teachers? My belief is yes. Okay. It can really cut down the workload. This came up in our discussions before. How can we use AI to reduce our workload? Okay. But the problem is that there is also this kind of, the way that it's viewed externally. Okay. Here's a few headlines from newspapers or news reports just in the last couple of weeks. The professors are using ChatGPT and some students aren't happy about it. Hypocrite teachers are telling students not to use AI while using it to grade the work. College students want their money back after professor caught using ChatGPT. Okay, so I picked these because I guess, we can smile about them, but probably somewhere deep inside there's this kind of like, ooh, ouch, that hurts as well. Okay? So we need to be thinking about this position of what is the role of us in moving forwards. Now, the point that I asked about before was, are teachers making themselves redundant? Now, I want you to be very careful about what I'm trying to make as my point here. I'm not saying that technology is making us redundant. Teachers can be making themselves redundant if all they are doing is acting as a technology operator. Okay, they come in and they say, well, okay, I need to make my materials for my class, so okay, here we go, ChatGPT. Whoa, here I have, it says, shall I make a PDF file for you? Shall I make a PowerPoint for you? Oh, thank you, very nice. Okay, here we go. We've saved some time. Great. Okay, then on top of that, then what have we done? Then we say, all right, we need to mark our students' essays. Okay, so we think, well, can we put them into ChatGPT and put in our criteria, our rubrics, and come out with some feedback? We can. Great. We've saved some time. But what are we doing with this time? So we say we want to use the technology to save us time. But what are we doing with this time that we have saved? And this is the point. This is where we're making ourselves redundant. If we are only saving time so that we can have free time, which isn't part of our teaching. This is why we need to justify our existence. Because we have some people who are using this as simply a way of making life easier without making up that extra time to do something meaningful with the students in class. So this is the uncomfortable decision, the uncomfortable discussion that we probably be needing to have. And that is, technology can be helpful. But what are we doing with it once it's been helpful? What are we expecting from our learners? We need to come back to this question. We're teachers. Okay? We're in our classrooms. We're trying to teach language. What are we expecting? Are we expecting improved writing skills, better grammar, confidence in writing or speaking, improved fluency, higher motivation, enhanced autonomy, appropriate digital literacy skills? And I believe the answer is yes, across the board. Okay? Most of us would be looking at doing this. But what are we doing to develop these? If we just simply plug our students into generative AI and say, here it is, here's the tool, I've chosen this for you, and if you use this, you're going to improve. This is not the case. As a matter of fact, research that I'm conducting myself would show that this is actually quite opposite. And I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about some of my own research that's just undergoing at the moment, which looks at this reality of the technology in terms of developing our students' language skills. Technology itself does not automatically lead to language learning. I have been singing this for decades. Okay? Here's a few other people who have been singing this for decades. And again, I've chosen older references on purpose. Deborah Healy, Joseph Colpert, my predecessor as editor-in-chief of the Call Journal. Okay? These people are really in technology. Okay? They've made profound contributions to the field. And they say this. I talked to Joseph 2 days ago, and we talked about this. We're giving a presentation in Taiwan later in the year together. Technology does not automatically lead to language learning. It's the teacher guiding our students to use the technology, which is how we start to make the difference. So we had in our opening addresses the importance of training. You probably know I've written a lot about training because it is so, so important, if not everything. Okay? Simply providing the technology is not going to do anything. Deborah Healy in 1999, why I like including her here, is she said that when we provide our students with technology and expect that they're going to be able to use this to learn, it's like dropping them inside a large library and expecting them to learn something. It's not going to happen. We now have an artificially intelligent library. But are they going to learn through using it? Not without assistance. And this is our role. This is our changing role. Okay? Our students are going to need guidance. They're going to need particularly clear guidelines. And this came up in discussion before as well. Guidelines. The guidelines at the moment, from what I've seen, are very, very mixed messages. We often have within the one institution, teacher A says, use generative AI. Teacher B says, don't use generative AI. Teacher C says, well, I don't know. So what do the students do? They get confused. They feel unsure, uncertain, sometimes even scared about using the technology. Whenever we use technology, we need to bear in mind, where does it fit in the larger scope of things? Technology in itself is not just going to do everything for us. What are our tasks? Just because we're using generative AI doesn't mean that our tasks are going to cease to exist. They are going to be different, but they are going to be tasks. What are the functions of the technology? Again, in our opening address, we're talking about our technologies and what we can do with them. We do need to understand what these tools can do, which means spending some hours with ChatGPT and pushing it to its limits, and of course the alternatives. What can it do? What can't it do? Ultimately, how does this fit with our task? And if it doesn't fit, don't use it. Sometimes we feel pressure that we should be using generative AI because everybody else is. Okay? This is not a reasonable rationale for the use of technology. A reasonable rationale is understanding your task with specific learning outcomes, your goals, and then seeing where the technology fits into this, not the other way around. But we often see people coming in from the other way. Okay? We have ChatGPT. Well, now how can I use this? I mean, this is an approach, but this is an early approach when we're first trying to work out what the technology can do. But we need to grow out of that. Okay? When we first start using it, yes, we need to explore, try, make mistakes. Then come back to what we want to learn. What are the individual abilities of the teachers and the learners? From my experience, most learners are not good users of technology for educational purposes. They can find anything about their favorite clothes or their favorite music or their favorite artists in an instant, but they've never been trained to use technology for learning. That's our role. Where does the technology play this role in our performance? How does it link to our outcomes? Do we have a starting point and a finishing point and a clear idea in mind of where the technology fits in accomplishing those goals? And recently I've seen these goals tend to be more blurred. We tend to be just simply leaving it up to technology and say, well, they'll work it out with the technology. But are they? And I feel probably not. We know some basic things about generative AI, and this sort of thing has come up a lot. We know that teachers see the potential of generative AI, but they're concerned of cheating and other ethical concerns. Okay, so we had a question at the very beginning of the opening ceremony. Okay, who's concerned about their students using generative AI inappropriately? I'll put up both hands and both feet if I did fall over. Okay, we all are, of course we are. But in many cases, this is because the students don't have guidelines. Now students, are students cheating because of generative AI? No, students have always cheated. They have. Okay? It's just easier now. Okay? But it's also easier to get caught. Okay? So that being the case, we often seem to put this kind of responsibility on the students as though they are the ones that are doing the wrong thing. But from my experience, most students are more concerned about being accused of using the technology incorrectly than trying to find ways to cheat with it. Putting aside those students who will always cheat. Okay? They've always existed and they always will. There's not much we can do about that. Okay? What I've found, however, is that we don't see very much in the published literature at this point linking generative AI with concrete language learning outcomes. There's not enough there yet. We're still talking about the possibilities. Well, we think we can do this. Well, I'm sure we can do this. Generative AI is perfect for this. Well, do it. Measurably. And this is something we're not doing. Okay, so we're living in fear of something we don't know whether it actually works or not yet. And this is what we need to be doing. Okay, here's some outcomes of AI in research. Sorry, I've got my in and A. This is definitely not written by generative AI. You can tell I've got spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. Okay, so efficiency versus learning depth. Okay, yes, it's more efficient to use generative AI, but how deeply do we learn something? Okay, this relates to, and it came up 3 times already, cognitive offloading. We're not thinking. Okay, we have empty engagement. Empty engagement is just simply doing the task without thinking. What are we going to learn from that? Next to nothing. We know that. We have some positive outcomes. We've seen gains in fluency in speaking, which I think this is nice to see this type of research where somebody was trying to get some outcomes. And this is what I want to see more and more of. We can show also that students will write better while using AI. Now, can you see I've underlined while using AI? Because we're seeing less evidence of what happens if we take away the AI. Now, at the same time, having AI is probably something we're going to be dealing with in the future as well. Okay, what I mean is, we look at calculators. Can anybody remember the days before you were allowed to use calculators? And then teachers said, well, if our students use calculators, then they're not going to be able to do simple arithmetic anymore. And they were right. We're really bad at it. But we're really good at using calculators. Because they're available. But if we find ourselves in a position when we want to see how proficient we are in doing things that we would normally use a calculator for, we'll find we're awfully bad at it. So this calculator effect is what we also have with generative AI. Students can write better with generative AI. They should. Of course they should. If they can't, then there's a problem. But what happens if we take it away? And I'm going to conclude with some simple results from some research that I've conducted myself. I looked at 65 EFL learners and I provided them guidance on using AI. So I gave them some basic training, but I didn't want to give them training from the point of view of telling them everything that they can and can't do. I wanted them to think. So I gave them guidelines, very clear guidelines, about what they were allowed to and not allowed to use, and some strategies. After that, I allowed the students to spend time trying, discussing, having group debriefings about the use of or how they use generative AI as part of their writing process. They wrote, you can see 5 and 6, great spelling again, 6 essays. Okay, they had a pre-essay first of all. I wanted to know what the baseline was. What can our students do without using generative AI? You can see at the end that there was another post-essay, again in class with no generative AI. In between, the students wrote 3 homework assignments. The 3 homework assignments were something I've been doing for several years. Now, obviously, I've seen generative AI coming more and more visible in this, but I've always maintained an open policy with my students about discussions. And I've also said to them, I'm not going to ban it, but we're going to talk about it. And we've had very frank discussions in class about what AI can do and what it can't do. You can see in the middle there's a mid-essay where AI was allowed but usage was observed. And you can see that there were some declarations. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire methodology because it's complicated. I'm going to present this in Calico next week. Okay? But basically, what am I looking for? Syntactic complexity, syntactic accuracy, lexical diversity, spelling, length, as in length of essay, and also AI usage. The students were doing post declarations, and I also carried out, used detection software to see what the students were actually using. The results were really quite interesting. It was very interesting to see those who wrote their post declarations, the strategies that they talked about using. It was very clearly distinguished between those students who had strategies and those students who did not. I was able to divide the students into 3 categories. High users who used AI a lot, moderate users who used it, well, moderately, and low users who either didn't use it or used it a minimum amount. And this is based on their coded declarations and on the AI detection results. Now the codes fit into, it's too small to see, it's not really that relevant, but you can see how many different categories that there were. The students were using AI for many, many different purposes. Now I didn't use checkboxes, it was an open box. And I asked the students to write a full paragraph at least about what they used AI for. And if they didn't use it, to also declare that. Okay? And the students did write full essays. They wrote it in Japanese. I didn't want language to be a barrier to them, so they did. And you can see anything from generation of textual content. So in other words, write my essay. Now they didn't say quite so clearly, but there were some who obviously did that. Okay, all the way through to revision cycles, and some people who said, well, I don't feel comfortable using AI, which was a limit on using AI. They didn't want to use it. Some outcomes, and this is, I'm nearly at the end, so I am aware of time. When the AI tools were removed for the post-essay, what had the students developed over the course of a semester using generative AI? Low users of AI produced longer essays. They were more comfortable in writing more. Now you can these were statistically significant, all of these. On the opposite side, high users of AI struggled to write. They did not write well. Okay? They also produced less complex syntax. They were unable to produce even the same level that they produced in the pre. There was a drop in syntactic complexity in these students, in the high users, from the beginning to the end. So being a high user of AI was a negative. Okay? Moderate users. The moderate users, for the most part, had also really good strategies. They had designed from the beginning, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They declared beforehand what we had done in a pre-survey, and they followed it, they did it. And these students showed the most development. Okay? They produced more complex syntax, they showed best improvement in grammatical accuracy, and they improved in spelling. The students who did not use AI showed very little improvement. This is quite interesting. There was some improvement. But the students who actually used AI with a strategy of putting things into English, writing it, having a grammar check, retranslating something back into Japanese to see if it had the meanings that they initially intended, checking the differences in translations between different translation tools. Students who had these various strategies were really thinking about learning. So the outcome is generative AI possible to use as a tool to improve our language outcomes? Yes, but it's going to take some training because these were complex strategies that the students developed over time and they need help. Only 9 students out of the data set of 28 students were using AI in a way that led to development. The remaining students did not. Some students did submit essays that were completely AI generated. But have a look at the outcomes. We see here evidence to show that this is going to be negative. Instead of just fearing that it might, we can say, there is evidence that shows if you're going to do this, your language is going to drop. You're not going to improve. And these are the things that we need to be talking to our students about. So I'll conclude my last slide. We know that AI tools do have benefits, but we need to set the boundaries. We really need to provide our students with clear strategies. So, how do we go about making ourselves not redundant? Let's think about providing our students with clear strategies to use these very convenient tools. The tools in themselves are not going to lead to development in the target language. They never have, and it's highly unlikely in the foreseeable future that they will. Okay? Teachers and students need to be open and consistent with declaring AI, and this means having open discussions. A lot of people think that Japanese students are not willing to talk in class, and at the beginning they were not. You give them opportunities and you show honesty, they'll talk. And I really suggest that you consider this. Let's have open discussions. Okay? And we really need more research to show what is the reality of generative AI and language learning outcomes, not the possibilities. We know the possibilities. Let's move past that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I haven't worked out how to work it. Okay, yeah, it's working. Thank you, Professor Stockwell. I was talking to Professor Sheck here, who was saying, is this being recorded? Because I think the President might need to hear it. Okay, we're opening up the floor to questions. I assume that's being thrown around. If you have a question...
Anybody need a question?
Okay, thank you, Eric. Do you want to throw the thing?
Okay.
Thank you, Glenn. It's amazing as always. I like your sharing and your perspective, and I personally would kind of agree with you in all of these things. Especially with the need for more research. Obviously, we've been highly relying on impressions and experiences and feedback without really quantifying the gains, just like what you have shared with us. But the other side that I'm also thinking about is really thinking about writing. What is writing? You know, in terms of what you have been sharing with us. Are we, at this point, kind of still overestimating writing in a bigger scale of our students actually going to be essaying all their lives after they graduate, right? In terms of their learning. So are we able to refocus on fully understanding what is new writing, right? So our creation and generation of ideas through writing is still going to be important when, I guess, editing is now more important, right? Accuracy is going to be kind of like what AI generated in terms of like, is this Stockwell 2025 article actually real, or is it there, right? So the skill of actually going and researching and finding that paper in a research article is probably more important than, you know, the grammar or the sense of what was provided by AI. So how are you going to be conceptualizing writing at this point in relation to the future of writing and the history of writing that we have been kind of experiencing?
Thank you. It's a really, really good question. It's a really important issue. It's one that I've been pondering myself for quite some time. To give one very simple response initially is that we're not going to be able to continue to assess writing in the way that we've done it in the past. Okay, it's just pointless because the students have access to tools, and to deny them of those tools, and again, this came up, our students are going to be using generative AI in their future careers. So if we deny these tools completely, then obviously we're doing them a disservice. However, we need to think about what the ultimate purpose of writing is in this particular context. Is it for language development? Or is it for being able to produce a coherent piece of writing in English? Now, as native speakers of a language, I'm sure many of us use tools that are available to us, electronic tools, to assist us with our writing. We use grammar checkers, we use spell checkers. Okay, so this is something that at a certain level, I think is natural to be using. But I think you'll find that this degree of use of AI and its relationship with assessment will need to be a shifting scale depending on the proficiency of the learners. So obviously allowing lower proficiency students to be using generative AI without considering how they can use it pedagogically is probably going to be detrimental to them. But ultimately, I think it is helpful to be able to train our students to be able to use generative AI as a tool in writing and polishing. Okay? Realizing that it may or may not have a direct impact on their technical language skills. So I'm sure that's probably not a complete answer, but you can see I'm very much in line with what you're thinking. I agree with you totally. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Okay.
Hi, thank you. Good to see you again.
Good
We
to see
met
you.
last year at the Hong Kong Baptist University when we hosted this. Right, my question is, I have actually two questions, if you don't mind. The first is when we measure students' improvement in writing, I'm wondering why we're still using grammar and syntax. Because actually when we train students to use another language, it is very often that we need to use English as a lingua franca in the professional space for effective communication. I'm wondering why we didn't use communicative effectiveness and cultural sensitivity as a measure of the students' success in improvement in writing.
In the research that I
Yeah. Because
this is one measure, but I had a specific purpose for this particular study. I was looking at technical skills. The students are not very high proficiency students. Okay, so I also did carry out other measures of their writing holistically that I'm not presenting here because I was interested in a particular type of development in this particular way, also because it's more objective. It's easier to determine
measure
small, measurable gains that can be statistically significant. Now, if we're doing holistic measures, in many cases, we end up with inter-rater reliability because we have to have it rated by different people. These are subjectively marked. It's very difficult to be having, what can I say, indication of improvement over time. I've done it, but this is a separate issue. Okay, so I think we need to be looking at, or at least bearing in mind that if we are talking about language, even as English is a lingua franca, accuracy is an issue. We can't ignore it. We have some people who actually push the other way. So, well, English is a lingua franca means that we can be making errors in the language. Now, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I have seen people who do push on that side. And yes, to a certain degree, yes. But at the same time, we're still needing to have minimum levels of accuracy, syntactic accuracy, complexity, that make our writing, and lexical diversity as well, that make us write as an educated user of the language. Because that's what I was particularly interested in looking at in this particular study, but it's not the only thing I looked at now.
Thank you. My second question is much more direct. That is, how do you define moderate use? Like you,
moderate use, yes.
Yeah.
This was something that was particularly difficult to do in the study itself. I was looking to see the percentage of text that was either generated, it was generated and modified by the student, okay, or is something that the student had generated themselves, they'd written themselves and used AI then to correct their work, combined with their results of their surveys, of their declared use of artificial intelligence as well. So I was trying to keep the groups where there were kind of fairly clear lines in the distinctions between them, but it was not an easy measure to do. It ended up taking me quite a long time to work out how to divide into 3 different groups. And initially I did it in 2 different types of criteria, one about the surveys and one about what they actually did. What was very interesting, though, was that I found that the students were very honest in their declarations of the use of generative AI. The correlation was very, very close. if anything, students were likely to over declare. So they said more so because they were concerned about getting in trouble, okay, rather than under declaring. And I thought that was a very interesting outcome as well. So as far as the distinctions between, it was a holistic point of view. Now I'm looking at a set of the data at the moment. With the larger data set, I want to look at the surveys as one part and the writing as a different part, and I'd like to analyse separately. But this is very much a work in progress. The data finished being collected about 3 weeks ago. So I'm in the middle of going through mountains of data, and I've just given a snippet of it here. But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your research.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, we're out of time for questions. Thanks again, Dr. Stockwell, for your great speech. And Dr. Jane Robbins would like to give you just a sign of our gratitude. Thanks very much. Yeah. And hopefully you'll have a chance to talk to Dr. Stockwell during the conference. Yeah. Really.